It's the 19th of February. Where the hell did this month go to? I can barely remember anything. Hi everybody, I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the Gamma Goat. If I don't keep running away, you can call in at 709-589-4406. We got a bunch of headlines from the time capsule to get through to kind of give everybody context. Back home, some of me, I got it at the hospital yesterday, stayed the night at my sister's, and got home here a few hours back. And we got a show to get through just to try to get back in the gear, right? You know how it works. And we'll talk about it. Had multiple heart attacks, 3 heart attacks, and got 7 stints. Apparently 1 or 2 is normal, so lucky me is all I can say. I'm going to get rid of the music. I'm going to give you an intro on nuclear, Fukushima in particular. That's the proper music that was actually created for the nuclear industry. Remember this, Eisenhower and many others had warned us about the military-industrial complex. That's United Nations. It's 195 militaries. And somehow it's managed to take over our planet. They have many subsidiary companies, including UNICEF. So they create the misery and then they come in and pretend they're the solution. It's frightening. So when it's uncomfortable and when it's unpopular, and certainly this subject we're going to cover tonight is very unpopular, and even when it's dangerous to speak the truth, and it's very dangerous in this industry, that's the precise time that the truth should be spoken, yeah? But don't go counting on journalists having those particular attributes. That's something we've been covering for many years. We do a 24-hour news cycle many times to show you that every single article on nuclear, no matter who the author is, if it's from mainstream media, it's going to be riddled, literally riddled with so many misrepresentations and disinformation that you can't possibly cover it in the 2-hour shows we've learned. Probably the strangest thing since Fukushima nuclear meltdown, which you're going to learn about right away, is they were growing food even alongside a 1-ton bags of radiation. They have an estimated 30 million to 60 million of these bags. 30 million of them would be 5 rows around the planet. Of bags. Try wrapping your mind around that 1-ton bags we're talking about. Some of it has gone down into the earth, the reactor melted cores, and once it came in contact with water, it split open the earth, and that the steam coming out of the ground is lethal doses immediately. And in this particular depiction, we're talking about 4.7 sieverts per hour. 3 is a lethal dose. You'll die within a few weeks from a short exposure. So imagine there's actually 6 places in one article where it's 10 sieverts an hour. It turns out that that's the max the Geiger counter could read. And International Atomic Energy Agency is United Nations, the military-industrial complex. Their job is to mislead you in every facet of the story of nuclear. Here's the current sadistic, demonic demon, Rafael Grossi. And think about your atoms for humanity. The A-10 Warthog only shoots depleted uranium munitions, dirty bombs. It shoots approximately 1.5 tons a minute, which is the animosity equivalent of 44,000 Nagasaki bombs being released in low-level radioactive materials, so to speak, compared to a high level. Still extremely dangerous. The food was banned in 14 prefectures in Japan. Think of a prefecture as a very large, 6,000 square miles minimum, say. It was the breadbasket of the Asian countries on top of that. It was around 1 billion pounds of rice a year was grown there and still is. They never stopped growing it, and 55 countries banned it in 14 prefectures, not just the Fukushima prefecture. And rightly so. They're harvesting food right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation. Those pictures in particular from the media saying, why are people saying that giving the prefecture a bad reputation? Well, it's 14. Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 remains. So at the top of the buildings was decades of reactor cores. As you can see, they're gone. So that's true for Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 because it's so visible. But it's true for Reactor 1 and Reactor 2 also. So there's Reactor 1. It blew up and caught fire and caught fire and blew up and blew up and caught fire. Guess what? Reactor 2 blew up and caught fire and caught fire and blew up and blew up and caught fire. You guessed it. Reactor 3 done the same thing. That's the stump of it. And this is the official 2 pictures, pretending they're at the top of a building that don't exist. If that doesn't worry you, there's Reactor 3. You can't physically go into a pool that doesn't exist. The building should be 190 feet tall, 150 feet wide.
Now, reports suggest that the reactors at the Fukushima plant were damaged by the initial earthquake and not the tsunami wave. Well, given that...
So, yeah, the number 1 reactor in particular, that's the stump of Reactor 4 you're looking at. Okay, so David Suzuki had said that Fukushima Prefecture, or Fukushima is the most terrifying situation you can imagine, and that if Reactor 4 should fail, you should abandon the northern hemisphere's coast. You're talking 100 and plus million people. But the radiation fallout doesn't stop at the borders. Here's David Suzuki in his own words.
3 out of the 4 plants were destroyed in the earthquake and in the tsunami. The 4th one has been so badly damaged that the fear is if there's another earthquake of a 7 or above, that building will go, and then all hell breaks loose. I have seen a paper which says that if, in fact, the 4th plant goes under an earthquake and those rods are exposed, it's bye-bye Japan, and everybody on the west coast of North America should evacuate.
So they're talking if this building, because they're pretending that the building doesn't look like that. They're pretending that the fuel pool, which is at the top of the buildings, above the reactor core, which is at the top of the buildings, is still intact. And so they built this cradle around it. It doesn't physically touch Reactor 4. And these are both the official pictures. They put these panels, they're held by gravity. They're very big panels. Remember, these, the original supports you can turn an SUV around on. So there is no building left. You can see the guts of it hanging out of the stump. There is nothing left. So many medias, on top of what used to be all of these medias and many worldwide have come out and claimed they're in the pool, which was at 100 feet above the stump. The reactors, not counting the fuel pools, have been described as 100 times more powerful than Chernobyl each.
The fact that the reactor in Japan is 100 times more powerful than the one in Chernobyl. And
so this was within a couple of days and it blew up. Okay, so that was just to get you up to speed. Now I like to terrorize you with some headlines from the time capsule. Now remember, there's 150,000 sites like this originally, just in the first several years. And these are 1 ton bags. So it was 3% of the landmass in the single prefecture, but 14 prefectures were banned by 55 countries worldwide. Tokyo, which is far, far away, 220, 250, depending what part of Tokyo we're talking about, kilometers away, say, at 29 million becquerels a square meter, 185, not 1,000, not million, but 185 is considered an evacuation zone worldwide pre-Fukushima. So obviously Tokyo should be uninhabited. And put some pictures in before we jump into a bunch of headlines, and we'll just meander through it the best we can tonight. We'll be back on Thursday for another show, and maybe Sunday with the next show. I got that in the description for you. So the idea of picking up all of these bags was to get you to think that, okay, they got it under control. And so 30 million bags should have been 30 trillion bags or more. You'll see. Tokyo should no longer be inhabited in Japan, doctor. And because Tokyo was incredible radioactive fallout. And to give you context of what this is, you're talking about 1,800 diseases and illnesses and autoimmune deficiencies, injuries. Death by cardiac diseases just in a single city, jumped in excess of 13,900. 14,000 extra people died in a single month compared to any other number in history. That's just a single major city. So the country seen 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Not everybody has health care. And cancer is not the only adverse side effect, catastrophic side effect. So imagine working in this environment. It's impossible not to be radiated. The bags are typically 100,000 becquerels per kilogram. And so this is a very serious numbers we're talking about. The bags are not thick enough to shield the victims, the homeless, the destitute, and the victims of society from the radiation in the bags. And when you're stacking so much together, it's impossible for them not to have debilitating illnesses for the rest of life, or death, or bring that home in their laundry and put it in the washing machines and contaminate everybody else. So, 1 and 2 exhaust stack are lethal doses. So how can you work on the reactors? These are catastrophic doses, far, far away. So how can you work on the reactors? Because you can't. 266 sieverts an hour is a sniper round. You drop dead quite a long distance away from that. If you're 400 feet away from that and you walk past it, you're going to drop dead. Because multiple reactors went down. It wasn't just that single building, right? When you see bags like this, that's the end of eating food from Japan to anybody that's rational. 512 sieverts an hour means United Nations nuclear scientists, academics will not go near the site, let alone the building. You will not get them on the site. And because we've been covering this for many years, it's too dangerous to be in the communities 40, 50 miles away. How can it be safe to be at ground zero? Monitors at 100,000 sieverts. That'll drop you like a sniper round at 1,000 feet. By the way, the food, when you see the bags in farmland, that's so they can continue to grow food there. And they never moved the bags. They just started growing food. Oh, it's all in the bags. And try making that up pre-Fukushima on your own. You couldn't conceive it, right? Number 4 reactor, top security, national security issue for the entire world. So there was a lot of hype about Reactor 4, but that was the cover story. But what an incredible cover story whenever you hear these types of connotations. Number 4 reactor, top national security issue for the entire world. So it's not safe to go to the ghost towns. How is it supposed to be safe to be at ground zero when the ghost towns 30, 40, 50 miles away are not safe to be anywhere near, let alone in, right? Because the radiation follows. So imagine ground zero. Officials sharply raised the radiation levels to get iodine pills after the meltdown, which should have an S onto it. And remember, there's 8 fuel pools. that atomized and aerosoled and were dispersed worldwide. The planet was covered in these plumes. I'll give you a model to help you visualize this. We have an endless amount of models to choose from. Many models will, this is the Francis model of the radioactive fallout based on 16 days. So when the model stops, you're talking about 16 days of dispersal covering the entire planet. Now, we've done research expeditions for many, many years on the West Coast and the East Coast. And why we didn't get the support that would have made this a lot better, we got enough. And we got the documentation. And we should all give each other a pat on the back for managing to tell this story with the authentic, uncontestable, unassailable documentation, right? Now, we also have an incredible amount of physical documentation on top of everything. You get greenhouses right alongside of is thousands and thousands of one-ton bags of radiation. In fact, the cover story in Seattle will radiation survey. Now, you paid for this in America. You paid for the survey. You paid for the equipment. You gave them the authority. You gave them the education. So if you did have an event, that they would warn you, and you can make your own decisions because this was what you, as a country, as a citizen, had created, and it was co-opted by the industry, the nuclear industry itself, and they decided not to tell you, despite the fact that South Korea and Taiwan did. One community had 3,000 Geiger counters that were showing absurdly low numbers, but yet was surrounded by millions of one-ton bags of absurdly high numbers, but yet the Geiger counters, 3,000 in a major city. Koriyama. In Washington, the Xenon-133 was 450,000 times above detection levels. And so you're going to get the same ratio of plutonium and americium, neptunium, strontium, etc. And that's why you're seeing all of these bags. So imagine 5,500 miles away in America and Canada, and this persisted for weeks. And this stuff burns a hole through your lungs and ends up sequestering. It's a short half-life, but it's a terrible isotope, very harmful, and the effects last forever. So the people you see standing up that has no understanding of nuclear, they're the homeless, the destitute, etc. They're actually burning the radiation. They got 1 billion pounds of debris in just one area. You're growing bags right alongside the one-ton bags. They're burning debris all across the country and then growing food. And you can't destroy it by burning it. You're just going to liberate it back into the environment. They spent an absurd amount of money on censorship. And the social networking sites, this is around 54,000, were happy to take the money because they only had a few dissenting voices. This is Al Jazeera talking about 30 million one-ton bags. Highly radioactive sewage was found everywhere in the country, can no longer be used for fertilizer. They couldn't get rid of it. They wanted Tepco to take it. Tepco, the bizarre corporation in charge of a catastrophic event. The idea of leaving the corporation in charge, which by the way was nationalized, because they went bankrupt around the stock market. But that idea was so you didn't blame the nuclear industry. It's disgusting that they've done something so despicable, but it is the norm. That is the normal. We got Michael Shell calling in. We're going to try, hang on, Michael. We're going to try and bring you in on the external again. I think I gotta do that to a soundboard. Want to try that again, Michael? My apologies to everybody. Go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you loud and clear.
All right. I hope you're well.
Well, I got a ways to go. I was in the hospital yesterday afternoon, and tonight I'm sitting here just for one show.
You know, you are grand for doing this.
I felt that I needed to do it, you know, because that's the essence of what I really am, and it gives me a lot of energy to sit here and do this tonight. Again, you know, it's amazing to be back. It really is. It's tough times. Go ahead.
So I wanted to let you and your good subscribers, and also your punk-ass bitch subscribers, to know I have a Twitter hashtag feed. There's only one of two that I'm aware of that mentions Fukushima. There's one that's called hashtag Fukushima, which I think is controlled by the pro-nuclear industry, and mine is hashtag Fukushima chat, one word, that is not pro-nuclear, and so far it has about 40 views, and I just want to promote that here.
Yeah, good luck on it.
Thank you.
Okay, was there anything else you want to throw out there for Michael?
If you have any advice to me about what I should look for because right now there's about 40 views and no actual chats beside myself. It's been on there for a couple of weeks or less, and so is there something I should look out for?
Well, I got a Twitter account. I'm at it all the time, and I got 30 subscribers. They got control of Twitter They got control of Twitter a long time ago.
So, can we be Twitter friends?
I don't use it anymore. Because what's the point when you after all these years, I only got 30 subscribers.
Well, but I mean, they're great. These are the most important people, you know, when we're talking about an extinction event, and no one else will talk about it.
I'm at it 5 days a week
I
up to
think
now,
we should
right?
be able to, like James Lucid and people like us, we should be able to talk about this on Twitter.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, my friend, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.
And so it's a very difficult subject to... The industry is not going to get in there and debate with you because you can't win a debate. The only debate you're going to see is the control opposition. So when you see all these Geiger counters that are surrounded by millions of one-ton bags, if the numbers are so low, why did they fill up these bags, right? Well, the numbers are, because we've got a lot of testimony from the employees, the homeless that were cleaning up these communities, and the terrible stuff that they were doing to hide the real numbers. The Geiger counters are not meant to give you the facts, right? Not only that, the Geiger counters only pick up gamma, and you have to do extrapolations on your own. Chiba incinerator at 70,000 becquerels a kilogram. So you can't drink the water because the water reclamation facilities, you can't get rid of the sediment. And some places have like 50,000 one-ton bags of sediment from filtering water, but the filtered water sediment is so radioactive they can't get rid of it. They can't get rid of the sewage because it's so radioactive. You can't get rid of the ash from the incinerators because it's so radioactive. Even the fog is too radioactive. It's a terrible country, unfortunately, because it's so in the context of it's so radioactive. And nothing on the planet has a autoimmune trigger to defend against the radiation. So your bodies, insects, birds, animals, mammals will attack the radiation. This is why they have these ghost towns. It will attack it every second for the rest of your lives until it eventually wins by building a tumor around it. And if you don't get diagnosed, then it can metastasize and show up everywhere else. But the problem is, we're not just talking about a single experience, we're talking about an absurd amount of radiation, right? So the radiation is considered 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It's like little bullets going off every second in your body. And so if you bioaccumulate a lot, because everything is saturated with it, you can't avoid it. And because you're shipping the food to you worldwide, you can't afford to be complacent. Now, when you see pictures like this, they're in paper suits, walking on big steel plates, allegedly. Some of them should be blurry, right? Because that's how cameras work. You'd have to have an amazing camera to take a picture like this. The suits can't protect you. None of the suits are ever torn. These suits are irrelevant. They're paper suits. They burn allegedly 7,000 of these suits every day in the incinerators on site. All nuclear plants have incinerators. And everything is staged. It very well could be green screen. I don't know why they would use the green screen, but it could easily be green screen. And we've seen endless examples of that. Plutonium-241 from Fukushima at 70,000 times more than the atomic bomb fallout, which was, say, 10 kilograms at most. The reactors are millions and millions of kilograms in the fuel pools. Right, so the amount available in a nuclear meltdown that also will consume, when it's burning at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, consume steel, rebar, rocks, water, everything else, atomizes and aerosols it, ionizes and radiates it, and releases it into the environment as particulates that are no different than the emissions from the fuel rod. So all the fuel pools are still splitting the atoms on top of that. Worldwide, there's about 1,000 fuel pools. What that means is you have an invisible snowstorm all the time from the reactor site. So each reactor has its own fuel pool, or multiple fuel pools actually. Taiwan told people to stay home and get rid of their clothes. And again, this is why you abandon many, many communities. South Korea done the same thing, closed 130 schools. But California was catastrophic numbers. We might not get to them, but say 220 million atoms per liter rain of radioactive fallout of iodine-129. Again, the bags were only meant to last a couple of years, 12 years ago. You got streets where 7 people dropped dead. And that's 2012, a year later. Well, a year and a half later almost. Do you ever tell of a street where 7 people dropped dead in a year and a half? And anybody that lived there or worked in that environment was the homeless, the destitute, and the victims of society. It's not academics, it's not nuclear institutions. They will never work in that environment. Government to refuse to provide funds to research Fukushima, and we've done the research expeditions. Too dangerous to be in a community tens of miles away, but it's okay to be at ground zero and everything is hunky-dory, and you know, it's absurdness. But that's the lie, and that's what we're stuck with. But the least we can do is warn you so you can make appropriate decisions to try to protect yourself and your loved ones from catastrophic food, for instance, that they're shipping all the time, particularly in Canada. Canada is a very bad place to live. Everybody banned the food from 14 prefectures except for Canada, lifted all restrictions after 93 days. So everybody in Canada is getting sick or sick. And think about how obesity rates doubled in Japan in the first year. That's a sign of radioactive brain damage, right? Obesity, large numbers like that. The world's food chain could be compromised. And of course, I showed you models of why that's true. This model is another small example from the Norwegian Institute of Air Research. Did I mention 30 million one-ton bags? Energy commissioner from the EU called Fukushima an apocalypse, which is 100% correct, and there's the evidence. Every time you see this massive amount of bags, that's the evidence. France says Japan lost control and the French should leave the country, which obviously was appropriate, right? Swiss embassy evacuates Tokyo, a couple of 100+ kilometers away. Tokyo lost almost all control of events at Fukushima. And when you see depictions like this, remember there's 150,000 sites like that in a single prefecture. Food was banned from 14. Major U.S. paper, time to quit nuclear power altogether, threatens the very existence of humanity. Well, you can't threaten human civilization without threatening all the other species first. They're much more vulnerable. Look at that picture and think of the consequences of that much radiation fallout, just at one spot, and think there's 150,000 sites like that. Well, hang on. The external is not coming in the way it should. That's a bit disappointing. Just bear with me, I'll see if I can resolve that. Oh, we got it. There we go. I want to be able to bring in the external. So it shouldn't be a criminal offense to be pro-nuclear. That's our poll tonight. And the truth is that 100% unequivocally should be illegal. Should be illegal. That one there? No. Should be illegal to be pro-nuclear, because pro-nuclear knows the difference. I just got a clip on my headphones so the weight of it is not hanging all the way to the floor. Here we go. I wanted to do an introduction. I was thinking about it. Human civilization may destroy itself. I mean, look at Fukushima. And yeah, look at Fukushima, though. Really, you know, if you only make it this far in the video, and you're pro-nuclear after that, and you got a university education, you should get your money back. Nobel Prize winner in NHK, only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. Completely turn. And absolutely, because remember, the whole country is covered, the whole continent, and then now the whole planet in 20 days flat. And so every time it rains, the stuff is liberated into the environment across all of Japan, but also worldwide, is into your drinking water reservoirs. And it's hard to perceive it as it's happening because you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up. But it's symmetrical worldwide. This could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet, because of the radioactive fallout covers the whole planet. By the way, this is the Tepco's plutonium-239 dispersal based on the numbers they released. And if you understand how this works, the numbers they release are going to be a fraction of the reality. I think it's striking. So here we go. I guess we're ready to start into the news cycle and just kind of have a, you know, I'm not going to go big long show, hopefully, but I wanted to get something up there to say, hey, look, you know, I'm pretty lucky. I'm back, feeling good. I got a ways to go on my recovery. And I'm still have that. I still have that spirit, I guess, into me, right? That the importance of it can never be lost, and so I'm feeling good. They basically fixed me 7 stints. Typically, it's 1 or 2, right? So 7 is an amazing amount, by the way. And the recovery is a lot better than a triple bypass. And so once you've done an ultrasound, they determined I didn't have any tears in my heart, and that the vessels were thick enough to handle their job properly. Then stents turns out to be appropriate. And then, as you know, with Kevin, it's a brutal recovery from a triple bypass, right? So I'm very fortunate. I feel very good. But the recovery is going to take a while. So you can't eat the food from Japan or anywhere else. But Japan, anyway, is off limits. And they're shipping it worldwide. it's very, it's harmful forever to you, see? So when it sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, and particularly with children, if it gets into the bones, it mutates the stem cells. And so they're going to have unbelievable, all kinds of health. There's, like you say, 1,800 diseases from just radiation. Not just cancer, but for children, particularly females, they're 4 times more vulnerable. Okay, so let's get into the news cycle. A nuclear crew coming down with blood cancer. Do you think that if this is when it finally happened? Can you imagine how many people actually died? It's not just going to be blood cancer. So it's so absurd to suggest that it's just blood cancer. It blows my mind. Like I said, there's 1,800 illnesses: heart, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome. Is just a fraction, schizophrenia, a fraction of the diseases that'll manifest from your body attacking it for sustained periods of time. So the Oppenheimer movie will be coming out soon, I would imagine. Can't wait to see the propaganda in that one. They got lots of movies out there, the Manhattan TV series propaganda. The industry has taken over Hollywood, as you know, a very long atomic train. There's lots of propaganda. They want you to go watch it all. And it's 100% propaganda. They have zero morals, completely incapable of having a dialogue with them. They live in a complete fantasy. Nobody's ever called them on it. And this is the only show that does an educational program in history on a regular schedule. And I provide an overwhelming amount of documentation for most of my assertions. I should be afforded a radio show where I don't have to work so hard, but I kind of can't educate and warn the population without the documentation, is my opinion, right? And it's not a conjecture, it's an educated opinion. Event to promote Japanese rice held in London. So these are recent headlines in summer from way back when. Why would you eat food from a nuclear wasteland? Do you think they would show you these pictures and say, right, we're promoting rice in London? In London. Now, Boris Johnson removed all restrictions for adults last year on food in the Fukushima nuclear meltdown zones, let alone the 14 prefectures that were previously banned for over a decade. In the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson removed those restrictions. And so they're there to promote the food. 2 years before that, they removed restrictions on baby food and cereals from the nuclear waste zones. Imagine being so evil as to ship food to children and 2 years later lift it for adults. Try making that one up on your own. You can't pick up radiation, by the way. You can only assume you picked up. Japan's agriculture picked up some, right? And the bags are only meant to last a couple of years. You can't contain it. The rain goes right through the whole system, and it still hemorrhages into the environment again. Japan and the reactors are still melting down. Japan's agricultural ministry, I'm not going to go into great detail. So they're talking about bringing rice. They got pretending or how to teach people how to cook with the rice as if people have never seen rice before or something. When you see any kind of pictures, like they were scraping topsoil, claiming that will stop the fruit on the trees from absorbing radiation, is not even voodoo science. It's not science, obviously. Right? I mean, you're surrounded by millions of one-ton bags. You're picking up bags in the peach orchards, which is a big industry there. And look at the useful idiots. Somehow, these are public relation firms in UK, right? Pro-nuclear industry. We want to sell rice from a nuclear wasteland. So as you eat the rice, you're bioaccumulating, sequesters in your muscles, your organs, your bones. You get sick. Your loved ones liquidate your assets in order to try to buy you time. And you have a miserable, horrible demise, and your loved ones have no way, and they're eating the same food, then it catches up to them. Now, so they're claiming they're growing flounder in the water from these tanks. Now, these are the same tanks that they refuse to let anybody independently inspect. The tanks were built as a deception. You can fill all the tanks up 6 times a day from a single reactor, for instance, normally, right? But we know this because we have hardcore documentation. First off, the Riva system, they had 3 systems: the series system, SARRY, which is supposed to aggregate cesium, the fabled unicorn of the nuclear industry. The Arriva system was France's water filtration system. Of course, as you know by this headline, it's 2014 August. For the last 3 years, it's been unused. So they weren't filtering water with this Arriva system. Or, in April 21st, 2014, the ELP system has yet to function reliably. Look at the date, 2014. So that's over 3 years later. None of the systems, you can't, if you filter the numbers we're talking about, you can never change the filter. You can never get near it again. And after 15 minutes, 2 sieverts a liter going through, it comes out the other end at 10 sieverts a liter, because that's how radiation works. It has yet to function. And so what they're trying to do is pretend they're growing flounder in the water, and that it's so safe the flounders have no adverse side effects, and therefore it's safe to dump in the ocean. But it's always been dumped in the ocean. This is why we've done the research expeditions for 6 years. And we were able to show clearly that Fukushima had wiped out 7,500 highly visible species. 2014, Tepco says groundwater bypass operations are not working. In 2013, they failed to deliver on a promise to install a fence to restrict contamination, because the fence can't stop radioactive or water from flowing down the ground in groundwater in a mountain. But it was a fable, right? 2 sieverts an hour of better radiation, so 1.5 liters is a lethal dose. If you fill up a tank of that stuff, then what that means is you can never build another tank there. You can't survive in that environment. You're talking about 2.4 million sieverts per tank. The ice wall operation is not only not meeting expectations, it simply can't stop it. Why would you build an ice wall when you can build a real wall, right? They talk about tritium, and of course to even suggest that the water is just tritium left over and they're able to filter everything out is obviously, to anybody that's borderline human, is absurdness. It doesn't work. You can't filter. They say they got fish 24 hours a day on YouTube. Well, good for them. Does that really mean any of that? Look, it's impossible to put any creature in 2 sieverts a liter, and you can't filter it, because you can never get in the building where the filter is to, and you can never change the filter, and the filter becomes useless after 30 seconds. And as we showed you, the Riva system, the ELP system, wasn't even used for the first 3 years. And we have a playlist dedicated to that particular subject of the tanks that will provide you with an overwhelming, an assault on your senses amount of documentation. Unless you're someone like this, actually gullible and believes that you can stand there and not have no adverse effects, and even worse, go surfing in that environment off the shoreline. And there are people that are incredibly gullible, but even they are capable of understanding the facts if they happen to find me or anybody like me. Fuel debris samples taken from damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor. So they're talking about Reactor 1. Now, Reactor 1 was 1 million sieverts. 1 million sieverts per hour outside of it. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. What specifically would 1 million sieverts be? And so I don't know why. Well, I do know why, because they faked reactor 3, like I showed you at the beginning. They faked reactor 4, and now they're going to do reactor 3. But we have an overwhelming amount of information to counter that, but will the world see the information? It's pretty easy to isolate a few dissenting voices, right? And that's what they get paid doing. For doing. The Tepco confirms the steam coming out of the ground number 1 was 4.7 sieverts per hour. So it's a lethal dose to walk through the steam on this site, by the way. This one is showing you an actual video 40 times the normal speed of the steam. Now the thing about this is there's 6 places where the earth cracked from the China syndrome. That's 10 sieverts per hour. That's a lethal dose. Every time this happens, they have to evacuate the entire site. And you have to do an absurd amount of work for the homeless to be able to survive when they go back. And that's why you see steel plates on the ground in all pictures. It's an attempt to get the homeless to live a few extra days. So 1 million sieverts per hour, they're not inside. They built this this sarcophagus type containment off-site and then laid it there. Everything's done by gravity. This is a Kevlar sarcophagus. Now, the resulting destruction of one of the reactors collapsing will take half the planet with it. So there was dissenting voices originally. Lucky for us, we have that documentation. The Futaba city that we're talking about in this particular article recently is first clinic opens in Futaba town since Fukushima, but there's no one living there. It's a ghost town. And it's a repository for 1-ton bags. And they're actually dumping the bags of 1 ton of radiation, growing food in it, in a no-go zone, within sight of ongoing multiple nuclear reactors that have melted down, is still ongoing, and 8 fuel pools. And so, see, if you try to say that to an average person, just that facet of the story, it's going to sound pretty crazy. But that's the sad thing about this is it's so crazy, it just doesn't seem possible. Now, if you follow this program regularly, you know, these are regular headlines. The location of the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant has been abandoned for 12 years, and they're growing food there for sale. So think of this connotation of, if the fuel in the pool at Unit 4 catches fire, it will be a global catastrophe at Reactor 4. Well, first off, that's Reactor 3, and that's Reactor 4. Reactor 3 was the mixed oxide facility. A global catastrophe looks like this. So this plume model is 468 hours, 9.5 days, 9.5 days later, 19.5 days later, it's covered the planet. And so the numbers we're talking about, by the way, are extraordinary numbers. So 30 people attended the ceremony. They drove in, got their picture taken, and drove away as quick as they could. The mayor doesn't even live there, let alone the 2 police that they have there. And you're right alongside the multiple ongoing meltdowns. And if they can get a few people, gullible people, to move back into that area, and they do, they got a few gullible people. I mean, in 2018, the airborne radiation was still higher than the government's max. But there's communities 30, 40 miles away you still can't go to because the airborne radiation is so high. So how can ground zero be safe? Well, it actually can't. Radiation never goes away. You can't destroy it with chemicals or fire. You got abandoned sports cars, but it's okay to go back far, far away, but it's okay to go back to the nuclear meltdowns and everything is going to be hunky-dory. So there's all kinds of cars all over the prefecture that are abandoned because they're so radioactive, but it's safe at ground zero. It's scary when you say stuff like that. And there's a big push now. They're going to allegedly dump the tanks, which is, if you go look up my presentations on tanks, you'll realize the tanks were built to manipulate the population into being complacent. The high-priced Fukushima Ice Wall. This was an interesting story because why would you build an ice wall? Why wouldn't you build a real wall? And they allegedly had 250,000 people, 260,000 people work on a wall. And the money that they said they spent works out to $1,186 each if you don't build a wall or anything. So in other words, it's just a lie after lie. And we've covered, again, I have presentations just on the tanks. There's a playlist that will get you through it. Leak of contaminated water at Fukushima Daiichi Unit 3 may have international worldwide safety. Highly radioactive materials, where they claim now 24 million becquerels per liter of beta ray, including strontium, 700,000 becquerels of cesium-134, 1.7 million becquerels a liter of cesium-137. There would be 1,000 fission products in that same liter. If you try to filter this and put it all in one place with a filter, for instance, first off, you can't get it all. You're talking you can put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, anthropogenic man-made atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. And we don't have filters that will filter stuff like this. We actually don't, right? You can't. You have to filter the water. The water can't go through the filter. If the water goes through the filter, the atoms have no issue whatsoever going through the filter, right? Because the water is way bigger than the atoms that we're talking about. So the catastrophic numbers, this is the alleged filtration system, and there's a absolute horde of death cult vampires. Like
so, for example, coming here, I would have got a dose of 0.07 millisieverts on the flight. And I actually went round Fukushima Daiichi on Wednesday, and the dose that I had going around the site, so very close to where the reactors are, it was 0.01 and probably lower, but that's the lowest it could actually read. So I got more of a dose flying here, and we'll get a dose tomorrow when I fly home, than I would have done from being in Fukushima.
Yeah, and so this is a lunatic who suggests that flying on an airplane has anything to do with splitting the atoms. They have nothing to do with each other. It's impossible to conflate things like this. 11 years ago, Sano Fukushima nearly became a Fukushima. So where they claimed that the fuel pools at Fukushima didn't melt down. Of course, I showed you the pictures. The actual documentation clearly demonstrates it. So, and it's really shocking the amount of propaganda in that particular story. Nuclear power is entering a new era. Yeah, the era of dying. You notice they're always surrounded by farms. That's to catch the radioactive fall. That's not an accident. Almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. And we've actually done almost entire shows just on that alone. How's our poll going tonight? Should it be a criminal offense to be pro-nuclear? Well, if you made it this far in the video, then I guess I don't need to explain it to you. It's impossible to disagree, unfortunately. The truth wins out, allegedly. Everything is downhill into the ocean. And I'm not going to detail in that story, but you can find it and read it. And Japan to start releasing treated water from Fukushima. The building behind them is the fake reactor 4 that I showed you earlier. You can't treat the water. It doesn't work that way. Right? They said that about 3 Mile Island, by the way, and they also claim 3 Mile Island is America's worst nuclear meltdown. Santa Susana, which is still melting down, it was 460 times. It's the equivalent of 463 Mile Islands melting down. So when they talk about all nuclear power is entering a new era, look at it, surrounded by farms, by rapeseed. Sizewell C plant will not harm the natural reserve next to it. Well, it's actually surrounded by farms too. Again, do you really think it's an accident that almost every single nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms? And the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation 24 hours a day. They're still splitting the atoms. This is why they're in pools. The pools suck up it, and each day they boil off about 120,000 liters per pool. There's about 1,000 pools worldwide. And each liter is going to be saturated with just millions and millions of long-lived, anthropogenic, man-made, harmful to everything but replicating cells, isotopes. Taiwan's ex-president on China nuclear power and the most stupid policy in the world. So again, he pretends that Fukushima had no adverse side effects, that they didn't melt down, the fuel pools are completely intact, and thank God for Fukushima, proved reactors are safe. It was really despicable, and I disrespect him for doing what he done. It's completely dishonest and disingenuous. It should be crime. He's the epitome of why I have a poll tonight. Should it be a criminal offense to be pro-nuclear? He would be locked up for life. Just terrible example of a human. Lack of competition in bidding for Fukushima decontamination auditors, the nuclear industry. So what they discovered was it was just a couple of corporations were bidding on reconstruction, which is basically picking up 1-ton bags they're talking about. Just one bidder many of the times. And the government's projects such as decontamination, they only had a couple of bidders that would bid on the job. And these were just fly-by-night Yakuza type operations that were only using the most vulnerable of society. In order, right, because they've got a legacy of this, in order to give the illusion, and then the media was quite happy to promote the propaganda, and waste disposal, like dumping it into the rivers and into the ocean. There was 735 public tenders in 5.5 years, and 49% had one bidder. You're talking about 30 million 1-ton bags. So go right on 30 million 1-ton bags. Nuclear power is awesome. And when you get back, I'll have a chat with you. The Board of Audit is calling on the government to ensure fair competition in public bidding. Well, there's no universities, academics, there's no nuclear corporations have ever been mentioned in any of these cleanups, so-called cleanups, ever. These were all fly-by-night contractors. And we're talking billions, tens of billions of dollars thrown at it to give the illusion. And at the same time, they continue to grow food, ship it worldwide, and kill you by poison you now, and you get sick and die later. Yeah, it was really an amazing story. But again, I'm not going to try to wiggle through the endless barrage of propaganda. We just wanted to make a strong announcement that I'm back and got a ways to go. I'm not even uncomfortable tonight. When you think I got out of the hospital last night, supper time, that's an amazing... And that's what they do. They boot you loose after the procedure. They're going to put these valves in your arteries to hold them open permanently. And like you say, I have 7. That's actually an amazing amount. Annual drill test response to radiation exposure at nuclear power carrier, which is the USS Ronald Reagan. And the story, of course, US Ronald Reagan, they sandblasted the deck of the US Ronald Reagan 3 different times in shipyards to try to get rid of radiation. They had 12 jet engines from the helicopters had to be taken out and sent to Hanford nuclear waste site because of radiation. They were within 1 mile of the reactors when they were going full meltdown. The story is just absurd of the exposures. People were defecating in the hallways. Their digital watches all stopped at about the same time. because of absurd amount of radioactive fallout. Annual drill test response again. Whenever it seems to come to the military, it seems to be there's no limit on evil. International group of scientists warn nuclear radiation has a devastating impact on the ecosystem. Now, our research expeditions clearly show this long before anybody acknowledged it, for instance. It's great to see this stuff. It's a reasonable article. It's not, there's no excuse. The academic community doesn't have an excuse to say they don't know about the damage from Fukushima. The research, we publish it up at my site, because that way there's no paywalls. But the academic community is available free for everybody worldwide with the GPSs of multi-year research expeditions showing catastrophic effects. Catastrophic. This model, by the way, is based on 20 days after the tsunami and 19 days after the first detonation. The radioactive fallout never stopped coming out on top of that. Let's keep it rolling. But that story is very important documentation. I'm not going to try to go through the bones of it. But they confirmed that adverse side effects are catastrophic to the species worldwide. They just don't articulate it. And we didn't have and continue to do so. Inside the race to tap controversial slurs. Every time you hear about nuclear being introduced to a country, the word's controversial. This is an understatement to call it controversial. It's catastrophic. This is why we got a poll. It actually should be a criminal offense to be pro-nuclear. There should be a 50-year in jail penalty as an incentive not to promote something so hideously evil, something that can't be contained, and that all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms, which I think is just striking. It's the biggest breach of academic in history is the nuclear industry. World first super magnet sparks nuclear fusion breakthrough. So they go through this absurd amount for 50 years now. Well, it's 104 years they've been trying, but 50 years hardcore. Their science is based on a paper from, actually it was 1904. They're still utilizing that same paper to crack that code. This is got nothing to do with free power for humanity, so to speak. It's got to do with the military-industrial complex and anything extra evil. So if they took any of this half the monetary and energy, and put it into something like geothermal, which could be used everywhere. You can replace gas, oil, and coal plants with geothermal, and a long time ago. The technology is obsolete. The only issue they got is some areas you got to drill down an extra 4 or 5 miles, so it's very hard on the bits apparently. But if you took 1,000 universities to solve the problem, you would solve it in 3 or 4 days. And you can replace all gas, oil, coal plants with geothermals, turn off the gas and oil, coal when the geothermal is ready, and keep all the other infrastructure there. And away you go, right? Again, they throw endless money at the fabled fusion, endless money at the fabled small modular reactors, which don't even exist, let alone on paper. There's only one nuclear company, NuScale, which has been around for 18 years, but hasn't actually produced a true blueprint. Because you're talking about 1 million pieces of paper. They're at least 30 years to 40 years away if they work feverishly at it. Surrey nuclear plant completes transition to wireless alerts. So after 3 Mile Island, most nuclear power plants in the northern hemisphere were required to have sirens within 10 miles, which typically some places might have 160 sirens to warn you that there's a release. And they switched it and co-opted it and uses it for everything but. They can have the biggest acts in the world, they still won't use the sirens. These plants are disease factories on top of that. Like you say, there's 1,800 diseases. New Zealanders firmly remain anti-nuclear as the AUKUS submarines draw near. And anti-nuclear would be not even allowed a submarine to dock in their country. They're talking about Australia, which has been co-opted by the U.S. military-industrial complex, wants 10 nuclear subs. First off, it's impossible to compare, Australia with the military-industrial complex of America. Australia doesn't have enemies that are going to invade them. First off, it's absolutely meant to take away. The maintenance on these nuclear submarines are shocking. Top salespersons for Fukushima rice. Now, we covered that story before I got sick. Top salesperson for Fukushima rice. The guy with the red on is a notorious, just unbelievable pump for the nuclear industry. A hideous propaganda machine right from day one. Fukushima Farm products still dealing with negative images. Now, once again, to suggest that this is a negative image where they're growing food, they're surrounded by millions and millions and millions of one-ton bags of radiation that they picked up. So these are not, this is not an opinion. You can't, you're only talking about 3% of the land that they actually emit to, that they tried. So, they're doing scraping topsoil, putting it in bags and declaring it cleaned up. This is, I don't know what kind of public relation firm stunt it is, but that's what it is. The nuclear industry didn't want nothing to do with it, so they gave it to a public relation firm, and this is the kooky thing that they brought together. Let's keep her going. But that's actually a long story. But at some point, anyway, they're talking about selling the rice on Amazon.com. The centerpiece of the latest years, among other things, is a program promoting sales of major online marketplaces, like many other groups, Yahoo included, where they sell it online. But Amazon.com, when I went and checked, they got a lot of rice from Japan and, in particular, Fukushima on sale at Amazon.com. So don't buy food from Amazon.com, because other countries will buy it in bulk by the shiploads, because there's 1 billion pounds a year produced, and relabel it, and then sell it to you under a different label. So you got to be very careful of where you're getting. If you're going to eat rice, you got to be extremely careful, because this is deadly on a whole different scale. So they made 3.4 billion yen in 2020, and that's just the online sale from Amazon and a couple other sites. That's $25 million worth of rice we're talking about. So that's enough to poison several million people many times over. And poison with radiation is permanent, see? Reset needed so Fukushima can rebuild from nuclear disaster. Reset needed. Again, promoting food from a nuclear wasteland, from ground zero, from ghost towns, where an evacuation order is expected to be lifted as early as this spring. Rice is harvested in Okuma. Kuma is south, 2 kilometers south of multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns. It doesn't even make sense. The community is still evacuated. The soil that they're using, they actually dumped the soil from 1-ton bags from, it was 500,000 1-ton bags. They dumped it and grew food for sale. I never dreamt in my wildest dreams pre-Fukushima I would ever hear any stories like I covered. It wasn't possible. But since Fukushima, there's been this no holds barred on evil when it comes to nuclear. Governor promotes Fukushima race in Los Angeles is Yuchibori. I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of times we covered that creature. We got a caller, Michael. Michael Shell is calling us back. Or did you butt dial me? No, hi Michael.
Hello, it's Dorsey.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to say, I don't even know what I want to say. Just so happy you're back, and just can't. I think you're one of the unreplaceable people, and I just, I wonder how you feel about me thinking about you that way.
Well, I've actually heard that quite a bit over the last couple of weeks from quite a few people wishing me well, right? I know I'm here all the time, so I appreciate that, Michael. Thank you.
And, if you were to have died...
Sorry?
If you were to have died from the heart attack...
Sure.
May I say that?
No, it's the truth, isn't it? I was in pretty bad shape, so...
So, I could die. I could fall down my steps right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's typical way a lot of people, unfortunately, pass away, right?
Well, alcohol, sometimes things happen. And, so, where is a safe place for a repository of the, okay, I'm going to be a devil's advocate and ask that Mr. Tokyo dude who said some very not good things about you.
Yeah.
Where would he find the massive amount of the evidence that you have to just press Control Alt Delete?
I don't know, Michael. I'm sorry.
Well, can we hide it from him?
I provide all the documentation. There's no excuses for my detractors, right? It's impossible for them to beat me in a debate, right? I provide the documentation. Right. They got opinions and conjectures. So I don't do it that way. And so, was there anything else you wanted to add in there?
Well, I just want to. I want to wonder, if there's, because basically it seems like there's just like a couple dozen of us. I imagine that most of them are pro-nuclear, and I just wonder if there's a way in front of their face to say we can put this research repository. If someone will want to access it. And
listen, I've had the pro-nuclear community worms way in for the exact same thing where they were allegedly partnering up with me, created websites, and turned out to be from the pro-nuclear community. And so I don't know what. There is a lot of information up at the Nuclear Proctologist. I got 360 videos loaded with documentation on my site. Like everything gets co-opted. Everything gets co-opted immediately. That as an anti-nuclear operation. And so anyway, listen, I'm doing a show here, and I just want to get through the show tonight. I'm not interested in.
I can access.
Database. No, I'm just doing the things I'm doing.
You say no so fast.
Well, there's 359 videos on my site. My site is loaded with it. It's free for everybody.
Well, that was magic for us when you were in the hospital.
Again, I can't have this conversation.
You have so much.
I can't. Yeah. Well, I share it all the time, don't I? It's available. It's always there. You can take screen captures to your heart content. It's easily available to everybody. That's the point of it. But I'm just a single person. I can't keep up with the things I'm doing. I'm trying to have the conversation. And I provide the documentation. I've done it for many, 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 many years. And the information is already into a repository. It's on my site. There's 359 videos. Anybody can download it and screen capture it at their will. The whole story is so complicated. It's not as simple. And it's something that needs to be explained. It's not just something you can just sit there and is self-explanatory. And so my playlist is a good start for anybody. It doesn't take long to get up to speed, and the information is available to everybody.
All right, so first thing I would like to say, I'm sorry, because I seem disrespectful. Second thing, the repository, extremely valuable. And the explanation, extremely valuable. I've benefited from it.
Okay, listen, I'm going to let you go, but appreciate the call, Michael. Again, again, that's not what I'm doing tonight. I'm just, hello, Fukushima type night. I've been down this road so many times, I'm just, certainly tonight is not a good night to think that I'm capable of doing anything rational like that. The information is available. I do this 5 days a week. To get people up to speed, and they can do their little part too, and they can do their little part, and the information is everywhere. But I provide it endlessly. I don't know what to say to people. I can't monitor my site, for instance, from the industry, right? And so I'm worn out from over a decade of hard work, 6 years on the ocean research. Mothers for Fentanyl and Nuclear Waste. I tried to get that into a t-shirt, and the site rejected the wording. Disposal of Fukushima waste proving to be an uphill battle. So this is another recent story. You got the 1-ton bags in another community. They don't know what to do with it. If you were to pick up all the actual radiation in just Fukushima Prefecture, you would be looking at roughly 30 trillion bags, 1-ton bags. And 30 million 1-ton bags, a 1-ton bag in the back of a pickup truck, you're talking about 5 rows of traffic around the planet, bumper to bumper, side by side, 1-ton bags. 2,200 pounds a bag, right? So another example of that is Hanford. Hanford dumped 450 billion gallons directly into the soil, which is 1.8 trillion liters. So if you took that and you put it in a fish tank, so the fish tank was 6 feet wide and 500 feet tall. It'll wrap right around the planet. So think of a wall 500 feet tall, 6 feet wide around the entire planet of just this legacy waste in the 50s and 60s from the Manhattan projects is insidiously evil waste we're talking about, was dumped into the hillside of the Columbian River. Every time it rained and snowed, it would wash more of it into the Columbia River, which is eventually ends up in the Pacific Ocean. But it goes through millions of homes. And I appreciate people's enthusiasm, but I've seen a lot of it over the last decade, and yet here I am typically by myself doing educational program. And it doesn't matter how much information I put out there, of course, that didn't change anything. I've been at this, I've been at this for many, many years, and I never slowed down, but I'm just doing my part of the big picture. And I can't, unfortunately, accommodate everybody for every idea. This is an idea we've heard many times. I'm putting the repository out there. The industry is, I had a repository of close to 2,000 videos, and they just took it down with the flick of a key on YouTube, right? While I was out looking for spiders. That was 10 years of research. All the expeditions were on that. Each of the videos were typically linked to blogs from different sites, and they all went empty. So I created a repository, and Google burned all the books permanently. And I'm just coming back from a heart attack, and the last thing I'm thinking about is putting myself through that again. Autopsy records for hundreds of leprosy patients discovered. So they found the autopsies for leprosy patients, but they burnt all the records after Fukushima from all the communities. They threw it away. They said they had nowhere to store it. 1.3 million tons of radioactive waste deemed safe by Japan to dump into the Pacific. By Japan. That's an interesting phasing. You know, again, I have playlists dedicated to debunking that narrative. But I take it to a whole different level. All the information anybody could ever dream of to make a documentary, to win in a court case, is provided in each of the videos of those playlists. Hard documentation. You got to do the work yourself. It's not very hard. Go to those sites, read through it, and screen capture it, and knock your socks off. You'll find a lot of it at my site, of course. But it doesn't seem how much information I provide, it never seemed to be good enough for anybody, does it? Nobody seems to acknowledge I exist, is what I'm saying, except for random, and Google disconnected almost 2,000 of those videos and documentations. It's really something. It's so hard to keep your concentration when you're telling these stories, because these are always complicated stories. Japanese food exports hit record high for 10th straight year. So after Fukushima, they exported more food for 10 straight years. And the numbers are just certain foods, right? It's not the entire amount. Japan farm exports hit record high for 10th straight year. Why though? Why did it? Like, China's not taking it. There was 55 countries banned it for over a decade, yet they grew past pre-Fukushima levels through deceit and dishonesty and deception. Japan's nuclear gypsy, a day in the life. A lot of these stories, these are the time capsule stories I alluded to originally. And the lies they told in these stories were just horrific. It was really like they were making claims, obvious claims like that Fukushima was only, say for instance, 1/10 or 10% of Fukushima emissions. And first off, Chernobyl was really bad. They closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, almost 3,000 miles away. 400 are still closed today. In other words, they should have abandoned Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. Fukushima dwarfs it. Each reactor in Japan was the animosity equivalent of 100 Chernobyls. Chernobyl was a brand new reactor, by the way. You never even had fuel pools. Fukushima had 8 fuel pools with 4 decades of reactor cores. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. Fukushima reactors are pure uranium, pure plutonium, and reactor number 3 in Japan and its fuel pools were completely, it was like a firecracker, was the mixed oxide fuel. And so the elements coming out of the meltdowns or the fuel pools are considered 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Our skewed perception of health risk, why fears often triumph reason. Now, whoever wrote that story is one of the reasons we got a poll tonight asking, should it be a criminal offense to be pro-nuclear? It was 13% of the voters, they should be charged for being pro-nuclear. The evidence that I provide is unassailable. It's absolutely unassailable evidence and documentation. And I provide it constantly. Fear of Japan's nuclear crisis far exceeds the actual risk, and then they claim a scientist, which turns out to be a dirty word after you look at the nuclear industry. Once you walk that walk into the nuclear industry, you lose all faith in the academic community. You lose absolute all faith in universities, and you have zero faith in your media. If you're smart, you'll end up with those particular attributes. And that's disturbing, to say the least. 2011, again, these articles, the deceit and dishonesty that was coming out immediately. This is March the 18th. This is 7 days after the tsunami. This is 2 days after the last detonation. They come out and suggest that Fukushima had little or no adverse side effects when it was catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. You lose faith in humanity when you see stuff like that. You actually lose faith in humanity. And again, I'm not going to walk the walk on that subject. We're almost through this. Radioactive leak plugged. Now remember what the reactor buildings actually look like. Let me bring up a reminder. Radioactive leaks are plugged. We've covered a lot of different versions of that. One was talking about using glue and sawdust. So glue and sawdust, allegedly, wait for it, glue and sawdust was used to repair that. The leaks. First off, the building doesn't even exist anymore. That remains the stump of Reactor 3. So to suggest that you can do that with any meltdown is an absurdity. There was an absurd parade of media making those types of claims, right? And that's the end of it, I guess. So I just wanted to, I was only planning on doing 1 hour. I was feeling good, so I went for the next half an hour. We're going to try to do another show on Thursday. I got a lot of recovery ahead of me. And I'm doing good, though. I'm feeling good. I'm glad we didn't do a triple bypass, and that typically it's only 1 or 2 stints for a patient after a heart attack. I got 7. And so they were pretty diligent taking care of me, folks. We should be really happy about that. Basically said I'm fixed, and it's just a recovery. I just spent $650 on medication, which we raised, and let me do a shout out for donations. We did have a couple of people that donated, so I really appreciated it. Originally, we bought almost a couple of $100 worth of sweatpants and t-shirts and underwear and socks and stuff like that, so that I can feel clean. That helps your spirit, and I can tell you my spirit was down. So when I was finally able to start wearing that stuff, that helped majorly. So Tab G donated $243, and a few days later another $243. That was amazing. And Stephen Young donated $50. And so today we spent $650 on medication, and that's for the next 3 months, right? And then I have to take that much again the next time, right? No, as far as I know, it's just a small portion of that for thereafter. Because I have so many stints, I'll have to take certain medication for a very long time. And so we still got to deal with the kidney. We got cancer on the kidney. Yay. Never stops with me, does it? Last year was a kidney stone on top of that. It's been a fun year for Dana. So I got to deal with the cardiac side of things for quite a while. I got to keep an eye on all of this. Everything looks good. And they basically fixed me. I was really surprised. They put a lot of work in on me. And they open up all the valves And I was immediately, within 24 hours, remarkably, no adverse side effects, feeling really good. You know, these are surgeries that go up your risk, right? And it took an hour and a half, and it was unbelievably exhausting. And some people says it's not surgery. I got no idea what planet they're from. But this is incredible surgery where they don't leave you with a great big battle wound, you know? So your recovery is much nicer. I was shocked that within 24 hours I was able to basically have a normal, you know, feel normal. It was amazing, really, because I was going downhill for the last 4 days until Friday. And the stress level was absurd for 19 days. It was absurd. And it jacked up to overdrive for the last 4 days. I wasn't sure I was going to pull out of it, to tell you the truth. And when we got the stents put into place, which opens up your valves, they clean it out and put the stents in there to keep it open permanently. An hour later, I was walking. It was amazing, because I couldn't walk, say, more than 15 feet without having the nurses having to deal with me for about an hour. So if I went into the bathroom, which was probably 6 feet away from me, they really did take great care of me. It was really impressive. I was very grateful to get another kick at the can. I have no doubt that we'll be back up to bashing speed in the next couple of weeks. I still got a long, I got a lot going on. I can't do anything for probably a couple of months physically, just to make sure, right? We popped the vein yesterday or the day before coming out on the ambulance. And that thing squirts blood a long way, I noticed. It's pressurized, we got that under control shortly after. And so I get to take that off tonight and finally get a shower. No shower for 19 days, just hand wash. Very difficult times. I was monitored. I was under ICU right up until Friday. So it's amazing. A Sunday night, I'm sitting here. And I didn't think for a second I would be here tonight. I figured it was going to take me a lot longer to recover, but I'm all day, been great all day. It's got here around noon. So this is my first night back home. Stayed at my sister's last night, just in case, right? But I'm pain-free. It's amazing, really. It really is. Okay, so again, that's a long enough video. I just wanted to put out an update. I wasn't sure how much of that I was going to talk about because it was very traumatic for 19 days. The recovery, I feel, is going to take a couple of months. I was really happy that a few people donated because I needed a lot of little things taken care of, and I needed personal things in the hospital, and I was able to accomplish all that. And then I knew the pills were going to cost me a small fortune, and so that took a big sting out of all of that. Right, made my life incredibly a lot more easier to get to the next level. So now I get to take it easy. Everything is covered with ice here right now. I can't even get into the vehicle, not that I need to. But the vehicle is actually one big sheet of ice along with the trees and other people's vehicles too. The battery is dead. And so in a couple of days' time, I suppose the rain will get the battery charger on it when it finally thaws out and get my independence back. I have no restrictions on me, which really, that goes to tell you how good this type of surgery actually is, right? It's pretty amazing what they can do. Very grateful for all the messages, very humbled, to say the least. Very fortunate on top of that there is people out there that showed up at the most crucial time and took care of pressing responsibilities and needs. Is a very humbling thing. And I'm just I couldn't do much nuclear, obviously. You're in a hospital bed on your back for 19 days, struggling. But I did manage to take 10 or 15 minutes a day and just browse a little bit of news and grab the most salacious stories and just throw the URL R into a folder, so if I make it through later, I can still come back and poke the nuclear industry in the ribs a few times. Again, we got a poll. Let's end the poll. Should it be a criminal offense to be a pro-nuclear degenerate scumbag? And the reason I got the poll worded that way, because I can articulate that it should be. I have no, in a court I will win. I will win that battle in a legitimate world. I can win that argument that it should 100% unequivocal be illegal to be pro-nuclear. Because you can't be pro-nuclear, like for the industries, right? For the propaganda machines, you can't be pro-nuclear. That's who I'm alluding to, without being a scumbag. And so I noticed we got spammed, 13% claiming that it shouldn't be, when that's desperation, see? To claim no. The evidence I provided tonight is absurdly overwhelming. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Yep, prepare for bashing speed. And I'm not the only person. And I'm not the only person to ever have a heart attack. Absolutely. There's a lot of people showed up with heart attacks while I was down there again, right? And some of the nurses that I talked to, not one of them ever heard of anybody getting 7 stents put in. And it was suggested I had friends in high places, and that's why I had the extra care. Thank you. I'll take it. James Lucid says he sent a PayPal earlier. Bless your heart, my friend. Awesome. Good night, everybody. I'm looking forward to reading everybody's comments. I probably won't get to it till tomorrow. It's midnight. It's 11:37. I'm looking forward now to taking a break until Thursday. I got nothing on my agenda for the next 2 months, only doing presentations like this. And like I say, it's going to take a little bit of while, but I got a new lease on life, and I'm going to make the most of it. I really am. And I'm looking forward to sharing that with everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on Thursday. I got the date below for the next show and the show after, which will be the following Sunday. We'll see everybody. I'll catch up with your comments after. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. So happy to see everybody. See everybody in a few days. Okay, let's call it a night. We'll see everybody on Thursday. Have a great week, folks. We'll see you real soon. Looking forward to it. Take care.